I'm about to introduce to you someone very special in the legal industry. Someone, when I got started with SMB team, was pretty much the only person that I felt personally I could look up to as a role model for what it meant to go big and create high standards in a business in an industry that, quite frankly, is outdated and moving slowly. So I personally am very grateful for Mike Mogill existing on this earth, because I think he's a role model for what commitment really is. We're just going to flow into whatever's kind of top of mind for you right now. I don't know what you have prepared on your end, but what I wanted to kind of hit on was culture, client experience, and standards. So I wanted to hear your thoughts first on standards, actually in reverse order. What is a standard? What is accountability in a business?
So I look at this from the standpoint that whenever I hear from another business leader and they talk about something going on in their business, like it's something with their team, something is happening to them, it's whatever, they're positioning themselves in some form or fashion. I don't mean to offend, but I imagine there's growth-minded people here. In some way, they position themselves as a victim. That, if nothing else, has always been interesting to me, because I think when you run a business, you have more control than over what is happening in your world than anybody else does, and implying that you are setting the standard, quite literally, of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, who you hire. If someone is not working out, you get to decide if you continue to employ them, if you invest in them, if you train them, if you develop them. So it's, if nothing else, I would say that you have an extreme level of control. But when we talk about a standard, I look at those more so as like minimums and not maximums, almost from the standpoint of a threshold of what is going to be acceptable for us at the minimum. So for example, when people say we have this great culture and something happens in their office that, let's say, is off culture, and they do nothing, well, then that becomes the new minimum standard, right? So then that becomes the new culture. So you're constantly setting these things, and you can't just say it's a standard, because I know there's a difference between ideals and then true standards or non-negotiables. I think we all have different ideals. A standard is literally that we're going to make hiring and firing decisions based upon this. Like this is something where this is the minimum by which we operate.
A question I have first on the reverse engineering side of the equation is, how do you plan? Like, what is your planning process when you're going in? You hold some of the biggest events in the entire industry, and a lot of your success comes down to, I'm very opposite. I'm like constantly taking action and not planning. I'm just making the next 3-month commitment constantly. And I feel like you follow a different approach where the stuff you pull off is so immaculate that it must require probably a year or more of planning. So I'm curious, like, what is like a 3, 5, 10 step ballpark process you go through when you're trying to go from idea to execution for something really big?
Yeah, I used to, in the early days, I used to just figure out, like, what do I need to do to win the month? Like, I would just think 1 month at a time. And just, if we could win, let's say January, then we'd worry about January and February and so on. And now, just to give an example, I'm thinking, when we're making decisions, I think, is this the right decision 3 years from now? Or does this still make sense 5 years from now? If let's say we're hiring somebody, let's say we're trying to put some big initiative in place or whatever it is, I think on a longer time scale. And if the answer is no, that doesn't make sense. Like, why would you do something today that may not make sense 3 years from now? But then when it comes down to like the actual execution of something, it really does start by mapping out exactly what, like you said, kind of working backwards from whatever the goal is. And then I immediately think, okay, do we have the right people? Like, do we have the people we need to make things happen? Like, for example, we've got a summit coming up. I know that there's a lot of event logistics. I know we're gonna have to put together over 100 pieces of content. I know there's design. I know that there's marketing. We got to sell tickets. Like, do we have the people in order to be able to do that? And if the answer is no, then I think, okay, well, let's work backwards from that. What do we need to do to get the people? And if you don't have the people and you can't get the people, you can't do whatever you're trying to do. So I say this from the standpoint of, like, it's going to require some leverage. But let's say you do have those people in your firm, and you do have the people in place that have the bandwidth to pull off what you're trying to do. Okay, well then who's going to be accountable for what? Like, I will say, in a way, you almost work like an orchestra director than anything else. in the sense that if everybody knows how to do what they're doing, you're just making sure that everybody's aligned and in rhythm. Like, are we all rowing in the same direction? But I'm not telling our designer, for example, how to design, and I'm not, telling our, let's say, our events manager, like what should be the logistics around the catering. I don't know. They know much better than I do. But it is, I think, the role of a leader to make sure everybody's in sync and that we're all aligned. Like, what's our vision for this thing? What are we trying to do? And then constantly reinforcing that. Like, I'll give you a prime example. This applies to all initiatives. I asked if we all this is for the event. I said, what do you guys think is the value proposition of the event? And I asked every person individually to submit back to me on Slack how they would define the value proposition, who it's for, what people are going to learn. And I think out of like 16 people, I got 16 different answers. Now, they were all saying similar things, like no one was wrong, but they were all different. And like step one is we've got to be able to answer this question the same way every single time, every single person. Because if we've got varying definitions of, let's talk about core values, for example. If we have our core values in the business, and well, what does ownership mean to you? What does results driven mean to you? What does team first mean to you? And I'll say that if not everybody on your team is on the same page with what that is, don't assume that they are. So like, I guess just to bring it back to this, it's one, working backwards from what are we trying to get to? So do we have the right people in place? And then does everybody know what their accountability is? And then we actually break down, okay, what has to happen every quarter, every month, and then every week. And then we even get granular many things and say every day. But when people see, like, let's say this two-day event come together, like that we're doing in November, there's probably 30 to 40 people that have been working on this almost every single day for at least 7 to 8 months straight to pull off 2 days. I mean, we're talking about like, we'll do like a shirt design and we'll go through 9 rounds of revisions on like how bold the lettering is. And it's like, and somebody asked me the other day, they're like, are you involved with that? Are you like, and my answer is yes. Like, I 100%, when it comes to anything client experience, yes, I am. But I will say that like, I wish that leaders shared more of the work side, right? Of the behind the scenes and lift the veil of like what it takes to pull something off, because I think sometimes it creates this false impression that it happens easier than it does.
So flatlining, let's talk about, we use this in some of our marketing, both of us, I think, the cancerous flatlining of a law firm, where the firm just hovers around, a certain $1 million mark, $2 million mark every year. And they go, when they meet with their accountant at the end of the year, and they come back home and tell their family, honey, we had a good year. Honey, we had a mediocre year, right? So when you look at in your past, let's say decade or past 5 years, and you look at your profit and loss statement, and, I do this through feedback analysis where I'll kind of look at what worked in 6 to 18 month chunks and just see like, okay, what really caused growth in the last 6 months? What were the needle movers? When you look back at your business for the time periods, excluding COVID, right? Mm-hmm. Just we could use COVID, but let's try to not use external circumstances in this example. When you look at the time periods where your monthly revenues just kind of didn't really grow, they kind of hovered around the same place, and you look back, what were the common denominators that caused you to break out of a flatlining? Was it like, Jay Abraham would say it's a business model shift, right? Some would say it's you weren't doubling down on marketing, right? You weren't going higher into your marketing spend. Others would say that it was maybe team. I'm curious, when you look at like flatlining, what are the causes and solutions to a flatlining business that you've seen in your experience?
I believe that the growth rate of a business is proportional to the amount that you're investing in that business. I mean, that's 100%. And if there's ever any like flatline or plateau or anything like that, it's usually because someone pulls back somewhere. So meaning they pull back on the investment in marketing, they pull back on an investment in people, they stop hiring, they stop training and developing. There's just this, hey, can we just relax for a little bit? Can we coast a little bit? Which I think is the most dangerous thing you can do in business. And I don't know, nothing good has ever happened to me when we ever went on like defense mode or like started to pull back. I don't know that. I think as a business owner, it's this realization And I've been thinking about this a lot. I really, really, really caution people from becoming, let's say, starting a business, if their goal is to have a more peaceful life. And I say this in the sense that, to me, growing a business is one of the most, like, I mean, you're literally bringing problems and stress upon yourself. And then as you solve those problems, you get new problems. And it's this, you're constantly having to move things forward. And because there's not this option of, hey, let me pull back, let me stop for a minute, let me, because then you're becoming less competitive. So I do think that it's a function of what are you investing in your business. And then if you take that a step back and say, well, what's going to depend upon whether someone's investing in their business or not, I find that comes back to their confidence in their team. So if you've got an amazing intake team and like you've got amazing lawyers, you've got amazing staff, then why wouldn't you just pile on the marketing, right? Because you're going to get the phone ringing, they're going to handle that call perfectly. They're going to move that case forward. But imagine you don't have confidence in how the phones are answered. You don't have confidence in the people you have in your business. You're going to pull back and say, hey, I don't know that I want to pour on some marketing investment if I don't have confidence in my own people. So just let me ask you this. If you knew that you had every single person in the right role in your business, you had the best people, the best paralegals, the best office staff, the best intake, the best attorneys, everything. I mean, why wouldn't you just go nuts and just, invest in that? So yeah. I think that's really the big, the big function there. But coming back, I think the growth rate of a business is proportional to the investment in that business. And it's very rare that I see someone investing a lot into their business and them not growing. Maybe you don't see it right away. I mean, you may not see it in the first month or 2 months or 3 months, but I can promise you, pulling back investment, I've never seen that cause a business to grow, ever.
So when you look at like the pros and cons, the difficulties of investing in your team, whether that means investing a ton of time and money in proper recruiting or a ton of time and money in training your team, because I wish every single member of a team could be perfectly trained and have thousands of years of experience in exactly what it is we do. But the truth is the 80-20 rule most times plays out, right? 20% of your team will have 80% of the impact, right? And I'm curious, when you look at the investments you've made in your team, which ones paid off the most, which ones scared you the most, and which ones were the most profitable?
I mean, I'd say to an extent, probably all of them paid off. The scariest ones are probably some of the most, expensive for sure. I mean, it's easier to invest in a book on Amazon for someone than it is to invest in, in them getting, their own coaching or their that type of stuff. But I'd say, I was just trying to think, what's a time where it hasn't worked out? And, maybe there's a time where like you invest in someone and then they go on and you're almost like training them to go work somewhere else, perhaps. I mean, that happens. But then if you take the opposite approach of saying, I'm not going to invest in them at all, well, then you got to live with them. And it's interesting because like you think like everybody who's attending this right now, you're investing in yourself. You're investing in new knowledge, information, and upgrading your own skills and capabilities. And obviously, if this is not the first thing you've been to, you've read books, you've attended conferences, you've listened to podcasts, you are probably much more capable individual today than you were before all those things. And imagine if you could extend that to your team. I mean, it's the ultimate leverage. I mean, even if you want to get mathematical about it, let's say you've got, a team member, they work 8 hours a day, and let's say you got 10 of them or something. And through investing in them, you can make them, 20% more efficient. Okay. And like you spread that across every single team member and like what their output could be, every single person across the board. And if there's 8 of them, what is 8 times 8? It's like 64 or something like that. And through the additional and 20% of that is, what is that, like 12.8? Anyway, you're getting like 12.8 hours a week in increased productivity times 4, weeks in a month. You're getting basically an additional week of productivity out of those people every single month. You multiply that times 12 months, and then you've got, what is that? 12 divided by, so it's like, you get 3 additional months output out of it. Okay. So, and I'm just doing my quick math in my head, but I say this in the standpoint that what's that worth to you? I mean, if you've got multiple team members and you can make every single one of them better and more effective and more productive and more specialized, I mean, look, it's, unless you just want to do everything yourself, which is, I don't know, that's a much more difficult way to grow and scale. It is being able to scale beyond you. And I'll tell you, because I had this conversation with somebody the other day, we were talking about leadership. And I said, like, because they had a lot of people coming to them and saying in their organization that they wanted to be leaders. And I said, I cannot understand for the life of me why anybody would want to be a leader. Like, I can't understand it. You have this ultimate responsibility. You're dealing with all these problems and headaches constantly. And it's just, I guess there's the status aspect that somebody may see from the outside, or they equate it to progression or compensation or whatever it is. But anybody that's truly in that seat as a leader, it's the most selfless role you could be in, because your job is to make everybody else successful. So I look at this from the standpoint that if leaders themselves are investing in themselves, they're trying to figure out, how can I be a better leader to these people? How can I be a better leader to my organization? Then think about what you can do if you develop other leaders in your organization. If it's not as dependent upon you alone, that you're not just helping somebody grow, but you're creating other leaders. There's no glory to being the smartest one in the room, or being the most capable, or being the only one who can do anything. I think that there's nothing to that besides ego. And when I find myself in that type of position, I'm like, I think I failed here. Because if I'm the only person who can do this, or if I'm the only person that has this answer, then it's going to be it's going to be a much harder road.
It makes me think about a phrase I've come up with: quality of profits. When you're valuing a business, to acquire, they do a quality of earnings audit. And I think about, for entrepreneurs, they should do a quality of profits audit. They should look at, where am I generating profits or gross revenue in my business, and how dependent is the profit stream or revenue stream on my individual time involvement. And I see this in lawyers, where it's, again, you could milk out some profits out of the practice, but the question is this like a McDonald's franchise, a systems driven business that is replicable? Or is this just a way for you to maximize your personal time output without building an asset? Because I'd rather earn $1 without it involving any of my time than earn $10 requiring me to trade everything that I'm doing, all my freedoms, for it. Would you agree with that? And what are your thoughts on quality of profit?
100%. I'll tell you what, I remember there was a point, and as you kind of go through different levels of business, I say this, I hope it comes across the right way. I remember when we had our first $1 million week, and I was like, oh, there's $1 million a year, then you get $1 million a month, then you have $1 million week, and then maybe $1 million day. But I remember that was exciting, but that did not compare at all, not even close, to when my wife and I were on vacation in Mexico. And I found out that week we had $250,000 and I wasn't there. Like, that is amazing. If the business is reliant upon you, then, man, how expensive is a vacation? Like, let's say you're producing, I'm just giving as an example, $100,000 a week, and you want to go on vacation for 2 weeks, and that production stops when you go on vacation. Did that vacation just cost you $200,000? It's going to be hard to leave. So I really do think it's important to consider, like, how does this whole thing run without you there, when you're not there? Like, I don't mean this as an absentee owner. I mean it from the standpoint of, like, can you be focusing on the strategy of the business, the new things in development? Like, I think business leaders should now be thinking about, like, 2022. Like, your head should be in, like, Q1 or Q2 of 2022. But if you're still thinking about how are we going to finish out the year, then I think that's a growth opportunity to figure out, well, how do I get out of that? Because I'm in a very reactive state, and the business is very dependent upon me on a day-to-day basis.
I just want you to, like, tap down, like, what was the personal, get as personal as you must. What was a personal epiphany for you in your life where you realized, like, I have to go big? This is a minimum requirement. Was it something in your childhood? Was it something when you started the business? Was it, like, what was the real light switch moment where you were like, I have to go big. I'm not going to ever get complacent. I'm going to keep growing year over year, even if my survival needs are met?
Yeah. I mean, like, if you want to take it back to childhood, my family and I immigrated to America when I was 4 years old. We were refugees. I grew up poor. I saw my parents how much of the struggle came as a result of, like, not having money, how much toil that put on their relationship, and how difficult that made things. I mean, even little things, your car breaks down, right? Like, your dishwasher breaks down. Like, that would be like a really, really, really stressful thing to live with. And then, as you kind of, start to grow up a little bit, I saw that, man, there is nothing great about being in the middle. All the problems are in the middle. You see people with like credit card debt. You see them unable to take the vacations they want to take. We're all stressed out, but I would rather be stressed out about how we're going to take us from this level to this level than stressed out about how I'm going to meet the payroll. I mean, that's a different kind of stress. So, I mean, there's things that keep me up at night, but it's more of like, how do we solve this problem? But I think when it gets down to the core of it, and this is why I do think one of the most important decisions you ever make in life, and I know, Bill, you made the right one. One of them is like who you marry. And it's important to find the person that you can be the way you are. And I realized this is the way that I am. And for me to pull back at any point and like to just, let's say, hey, slow down a little bit. We're worried about you. If you hear that kind of stuff, that's a good thing. But for me to be that would be inauthentic to kind of my natural way of being. And Tim Grover actually helped me with this, who wrote the book Winning. I asked him, I was like, man, will you write this book about winning and it rubs a bunch of people the wrong way? And you're talking about, because he'd worked with, he was the performance coach to Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and Dwayne Wade and Russell Wilson, all these guys. And he writes this book about just like winning. And he has different people define it in different ways of what it means to succeed at the highest level. And there's a lot of people that will read this book and they'll be like, I don't agree with that. That's too much. Like, is he happy? Like, are people like this happy? And he says, the people who say that are the ones who've never won at the highest level. But if you ask the ones who have, they'll say winning is everything. And the reason why, it's like, I think at the core of it, if you want to get like psychological with it, I think it is being able to test your capabilities and being able to maximize your own potential of why you exist on this planet and the impact you make. And I find that the ones that do succeed at the highest level, they operate with this sense of urgency where they think, hey, I've got to maximize the impact that I make. I don't want to leave something on the table of knowing that we could have done this, we could have helped these people, we had this ability to do this, and we simply didn't do it for some reason that somebody convinced us of. And it doesn't mean you have to have this trade-off of being able to like be a great mom or a great dad and then being able to be successful. It just means you have to be much more intentional and you have to do things perhaps in a different way. You may have to hire a greater support team. You may have to be more strategic. You may have to be more resourceful. But I'd say, like, why do I keep going? I got to stay excited. I mean, I don't know what Morris Bart said, but I will say that it's like when you retire, you expire. And when you were saying this, I was like, retire from what? I mean, how long can you lay on a beach? I don't know, like what, 2 months, 3 months? I mean, at some point you're going to be like, all right, if you're the type of person like Mark Manson said this, if you guys heard him on the podcast, he said, like, what is happiness and what is fulfillment? And it's struggle. And if you remove the struggle from somebody, like, you're going to have some very unhappy people. Perfect example, trust fund kids. You look at like trust fund kids and their level of happiness. You go to California and you look at zip code based by net worth, and you'll see that the higher the net worth zip code, the higher the incidences of anxiety and depression. When you remove the struggle from someone, you remove the fulfillment and the growth from someone. And we as human beings, we need that. So I almost look at it from the standpoint of like doing less. I don't know how that in any world can make someone feel more fulfilled. They may feel like they need a break right now. I can understand that if someone's saying that. But if your goal is to get out of whatever it is that you're doing, like if you're trying to like figure out like, how do I get out of my practice, or how do I stop, I sell this thing or whatever it is, that's a problem. Like, I don't know that you should ever be like in a place where you're trying to figure out how you get out of doing the very thing that you're doing. So maybe find whatever it is that you like that you can, it doesn't mean you won't be without its challenges and struggles, but I do think it's a recipe for unhappiness if you're trying to always get out of what it is that you're doing.